building functioning ministries, when you don't even have your own country. Now, in order for you to get your own country, you have to reconcile. How many times our soldiers were sent to Uganda to this very day, that being trained and brought back and so forth and so on. Our politicians are going to Belgium, this $2 billion we're going to be donating to Somalia. Where did these money go? It's a very good question, and it's a difficult one to answer. But I'll just go over some of the things I know about the corruption that you mentioned, and also whether they can make that much money in there or not. My interest is I'm definitely in support of people going there to make living, because we do need technocrats there. But when we're talking about changing the country, technocrats are not really the PCD to change this country. I'll give you an example. Don't take my word for it. If you remember, when Farmajo came as a prime minister, right, under Sharif Shah Ahmed, that Tayo cabinet, if you remember, it was called technocrats. I mean, the prime minister was repeating, I got technocrats who are really going to change. And my argument, and I was working at the time with the government, was, no, you really don't need technocrats right now. The more you say that, the more those people who I was just talking about, the Halan, say, we got the right person. Why? Because you don't even have your own country. How are you going to be talking about building institutions, building functioning ministries, when you don't even have your own country? Now, in order for you to get your own country, you have to reconcile. And that's the difficult part. And that's the part that needs work. And that's the foundation that we need for us to change the country. Notice that I veered away from focusing on the people that are going to get the job, because that is not something that I can either earn them more money. Each person can go there and could really go to ministry A or B or C and say, this is how I'm qualified, accept me this way, or walk away and find themselves other private companies, and there are people who are doing that. But at the end of the day, if every graduated person did the exact same thing for the next 30 years, we're still going to have the same problem, if not worse, because that's not going to change anything. Some of you may get shocked hearing this and say, but I thought if a ministry was strengthened, things will change. Now, suppose I'm the Halana guy who pays some of your funding. What advantage do I have in that? I would have advantage on a person who would come to do the work. Tell them that's your office right there. Just within the next 8 hours, deliver A, B, C, D, E, F, G. Yes, sir. We have plenty of those. People have to organize. People have to understand what it would take to reconstitute Somalia. This country that's, my brother Abukar said earlier, that it is totally failed state. 1992, Bush Sr. said that, which is why I was against the idea of saying that Somalia owes any debt to anybody in the world. If the country died, who do you owe anything? That person does not owe anybody anything, right? The international debts I'm talking about. But that's a different story. So yes, those people deserve to get paid. And I'm not the person who would be able to pay them. But I'm just talking about for the interest of inspiring the youth to organize. To organize, which is what Abdul and his organization and all of that. Power is in an organization, not in the individual. I can stand here all night and talk about what I did. At the end of the day, I'm an individual. The only power that I can make is when I associate with others, even though they have a different point of view than mine, and strengthen our vision together, and then change the country in that fashion. Yeah, so thank you. Yeah, there's a...
I just wanted to know States' interest in Somalia. Um, as they say that they're trying to build a democracy, but they overthrew a lot of democratically elected politicians all over Africa and in South America. They're currently based in Somalia. They have a military base there. And I just wanted to understand, do you speak about that in your book, the United States, what their mission is in Somalia and what are they trying to gain in that country?
A very good question. Very good question. In fact, I do. And a whole lot at that. United States of America is the mightiest nation on the face of the earth, okay? Not only militarily, but economically and everything. To put it in perspective, U.S. now has 750 military bases around the world in 195, 96 countries around the world, okay? 750. In some countries, they have close to 100 or 80 or something like that bases, okay? So nobody's threatening the U.S. in that sense. However, being the sole power, you're always seeking your advantage, and there's nothing wrong with that. Geopolitical advantage, which is really what it needs today against China. Some of you may remember some few years, well, a little over a decade ago, when the NSA, I believe, were in a congressional hearing saying, actually it was a little bit more than 10 years ago, they were saying that by year 2020 or so, some were speculating even earlier than that China would be really a power, to reckon with, okay? Now, the U.S. decided to go ahead and tell people that. These are the NSA, meaning National Security Agency, they have the most highly kept secret that are really gonna, that can undermine the security of this nation. Why was that information being given ahead of time? For us, on one hand, it's to inspire people to know that, look, don't just think U.S. has 750, at the time it was 800, now it's 750, that we're so powerful we don't have to be afraid of anybody. You should never think that way. You should be always seeking way to strengthen your power even more. U.S. did that in 2007. How many of you know about AFRICOM? Yeah? Everybody, most people raise their hand. AFRICOM is a floating base, military base, that literally had control on intelligence and military. It's a world out there, basically. From intelligence gathering to military base where you can attack any part of Africa and Asia and any place else that you want. That was put together in 2007, okay? 2007. It cost billions of dollars. If I remember correctly, over 500 billion. I'm not sure if it was 700. Either way, what they were trying to do is to establish themselves in Africa. Why? Because the two waters that we happen to be, the nation that has the natural right to it, which is the Red Sea, and the Indian Ocean, were the most important waterways in the 21st century. Robert Clark, who was a genius in my opinion, strategically speaking, he was one of the neocon supporters in the past. I don't agree with him politically, but you cannot take away from his thinking, right? What he was saying is he who controls that water, especially the Indian Ocean, controls the 21st century. So the base was made, and the base has to be parked somewhere. The base that I just described is a world of its own. Research what AFRICOM is all about, and see what it is. So it has to be parked somewhere. One of the areas that has to be parked for the ideal was Berbera. But they can only do that if Somalia is united. But guess what? Our people don't want to be united, you see? So they had to be part of that politics. We support this, we support that, So U.S., that's what their primary interest is. Aside from the resources, which is really common throughout Africa, it's not just unique for Somalia, There are a lot of companies that American government does not invest in mining somewhere, in northern Somalia or Galmudug or any place like that. All the places, by the way, in Somalia that you hear that you should not go there because Shabab are there. Okay, they're back there in the mountains. They are Shabab. That's the place that people want to go, because in those places, most of them, there's illegal mining that goes on. That's just a side thing. That's icing on the cake for the U.S. Companies that are either mercenaries or corporations big that want to really get the mining, they want to get the oil and all of that. This is a capitalist country, so they have to facilitate that for her. That's what their interest is, in a nutshell. But we can talk more about it.
My last question is, I've always wondered if the United States benefits from a weak Somalia, where they probably contribute to the destabilization, which they did in 1991.
Very good question.
Continue to still contribute in the destabilization. Do they benefit from a weak Somalia?
Very good question. Very good question. Now, in order to answer that question, we have to go back to 2014. How many of you watched a policy speech delivered by Ambassador, or at the time she was Under Secretary of State, Wendy Marshall, in 2014, USAIP? Some of you are raising their hands back there. That speech, if you did not listen to it, Google it up and listen to that. Because that's where America was saying, this is where we part ways. When the U.S. tells you this is a policy speech, you better pay attention. When they're just standing there and just babbling stuff, let it go into one ear and exit out of the other. But if they say this is a policy speech, pay attention. Because the State Department is not going to send one of the high-level official to go into an institution such as USIP and deliver a speech that says, this is our policy speech towards Somalia. At the time, Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud was Madaxweyne. He was the president, and he happens to be the president now. What the speech said in a nutshell, it talked about a whole lot of things. But the key point is probably in the middle or towards the end of their speech, where she says Somalia would have to make a choice. And that choice is whether to be together and have one office, one entrance that we can deal with, or whether to continue playing their game the way they like to play. And we can deal with both. What they said is, if you're united, we have international support for your unity. Now we have one president to deal with, one treaty to sign, one joint military exercise, or whatever the case is. One strategic partner in that sense. But if you want to clanize everything, we also know those things. We send you the right people for that. And that happened in 2014. Now the rest of us, we fight over what I described in the book also, is we're on top of that floating big aircraft carrier. All our madaxweyneyaal are on top, all the big heads are on top. Every person says, I can solve the problem. The other person, no, he can solve over there, and they're having their own issues. But the ship continues to go where it was intended to go. People on the deck are kind of enjoying themselves, one is wearing a suit, That is what's happening in Somalia now. Does the U.S. have a policy towards Somalia right now? Read my lips, as George Sr. said, Bush Sr. said, no. It does not. What it has is a policy that can be made up by the guy or the lady who sits behind the walls of Halana without really consulting anybody with the State Department or getting the green light from them. That guy or that lady can decide what they want to do with Somalia, and that's the policy of the U.S. There is no policy. That's why you don't see Madaxweyne Kulma president and president high level. You see, when was the last time you seen that? Do you see the pictures that are just the president Hassan Sheikh Mahmoud was here about a month or so go to the US. Once he finishes, guess who was the first person that he met? The Pentagon, right? The Secretary of Defense. Because the whole policy is operated out of AFRICOM, not the State Department. Once it's done with them, the guy comes to the State Department, stands with the Secretary of State, they take a beautiful photo, and that's the policy of the US. You know, that's the reality. Now, if you think I'm making up stuff, you have 31 years to look back. If that would be enough evidence for you. You don't have to read a book for that. Just rewind your memory. Read what has been happening over the years. And Google up the speech that I just told you. Fact check all of these things, the garbage that I'm talking about, and see if it makes sense at the end of the day. So, yeah.
So we want to go to the next question.
First of all, I thank Asidon to host you tonight. Second, you talked about, about US and other issues, but I'm concerned about the reconciliation part in Somalia. Do you think that Somalia can go forward without reconciliation at the bottom, Somali to Somali? That's my question. And how can we make that
Yes.
to happen?
MashaAllah. That's an excellent question. Reconciliation is the foundation of every society. Now we talk about so many times assigning a minister to finish the constitution, to do this, to do that. All of these are very interesting concepts, but in reality, nothing will move forward without reconciliation. Nothing will move forward without reconciliation. Why? Because only after genuine reconciliation takes place can people trust one another. You don't establish a family with a person that you don't trust, let alone be a partner in a nation building. That's the reality, you know. So the more fragmented we are today, if you think that was it, we reached the very bottom, if there is no real, genuine reconciliation between Somalis and forgive one another, expect wars. Expect wars. Those who are now 7 or 6, I call them 7 because I've been always adding Somaliland as a federal state for over the years. I list them, all of them as land, you know, including all of them. So, and the central government as a federal entity, you know, social, federal state, I should say. So each one of them who has a president title, yeah? I think I always argued that they have equal power, more or less, and we see that now, you know. Because the president of the central federal government cannot dictate to the other people. They have equal power. So they will always move away from one another, move away from the interest of the country until, and this is where it's very painful for me to say, but I must say, until they get their orders. Not because Somalis talked, not because they agreed on any issue, including the ones that are sitting right now in Halan, or just ended the day before. Never. Always they will have an issue. This drama that we were witnessing just now that ended used to happen on the 3rd year of the presidency of any given. All the presidents that have been there, the 3rd year the same problem started, only to reinvent the problem again. So these people would have some issues. No, I'm not going to talk to that guy. That guy is about to poison me. That guy, I hate his guts, blah, 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 blah. Then until they get the orders. MashaAllah, everybody looks good. They come, they shake hands, and the tent looks so wonderful, and the picture is beautiful. And then we march on to the next drama. Because as my brother said earlier, we're an oral society. We're interested more in that drama than solving a problem. I hate to say this. So absolutely, we need to get reconciliation that's owned by Somali, funded by Somali. If you're waiting for international, look, we have corporations that can really sponsor this 1,000,000 times, not one time, 1,000,000 times. There are billionaires out there today It's two of the big names that you have from Hormuz to Dahabshil to Dana, they're billionaires you're talking about. Their assets are not revealed, but everybody knows who's owned by that, Hormuz. Who's owned by that, Dahabshil. Who's owned by that? You're talking about billionaires. Can they not sponsor one that's really owned by Somali? They can. But who is there to run that? That's where organization comes. That's where what I believe is, until you find really fresh-minded or clear-hearted youth that are really standing up for this, make plan for it, and that aanan ka lahayn dan gaar ah oo shaqadoon aanan ahayn, aad u hesho u istaagaan hawshaan, you will not find the reconciliation we're looking for. And we're tired of those, the ones that we have seen over the years in Kenya, in Ethiopia, and elsewhere, Djibouti, and so forth. So,
That is national reconciliation outside.
yes.
I'm talking about between the Somalis.
Ha. And at different levels, you're talking about like communities, for example. The communities, Jazakallah khair. The communities, I think, in here, for example, what we were just talking about, you first need leadership. People don't organize themselves. People are organized by individuals who think that it's their responsibility to organize others and to give them a space. Not to control them and not to dictate to them, but to give them space and to give them an advice and take the best out of their suggestions and so forth and incorporate those things. That can start at every local level, in Boston, in Columbus, Ohio, in everywhere. But I was talking about more like the national one. The national one, you really need people to stand up and recognize that without it, nothing will materialize.
All right, we're very short on time. We're just going to take one more question. We do have an event tomorrow at the masjid. I believe it starts at 4 o'clock, ISPCC. I'm going to hand the microphone to Santiago.
Thank you. I'm very excited about this, Brother Arman. My question to you is that I read a little bit of your book, and also I'm a big follower of yours in Twitter. One of the questions that you say a lot of times that I hear you is that ask questions, right? And I'm one of those ask questions kind of guy. But also, I'm excited that you're here. The reason I'm excited is that if you have a strong mind people, right? And I'm a so, and I think that's when you say ask questions, means that go and ask the questions and learn. And I think that's where it comes from that.
Yes.
My question to you is this. Former president, Pierre Nkurunziza, Ismail Umar Yoweri Museveni, what do they have in common in Somalia? And this is something that I might not be onto something, but I could be wrong. But those are the major countries in there when it comes to Amazon, right? Burundi, Djibouti, and also Uganda, right? But if you look at those countries and the history of those individual men, they are dictators, they are corrupt, but yet they're here to solve the problem of Somalia. And one of me reading from your book, what I've understood is that, I don't want to make this question longer, is that illegally, Ethiopia entered illegally into Somalia. But then Kenya also illegally into Somalia with the advice of US asking them not to enter. But who invited those three? And when you said that it was when I say who invited, Somalia made the decision for them to come and solve our problem, or is this something that's pushed by the international community? And do the Somalis and the politicians understand that the man that's supposed to solve our problems, their own home, there's a problem, and they're corrupted, and they're wrong in so many ways. So I have so many questions, but that's the one that I want to make it short and get to that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Out of the three, what they have in common is all three of them are dictators. People who have ruled Africa for longer than they're supposed to. However, I wouldn't really spend a lot of time on the other two. I will give you one example, and you can use that on others. That's the example of Museveni, the role of Uganda in this whole thing, and the timing. How many of you remember about AFRICOM? When was it? What year was it founded? No. Anybody paid attention? AFRICOM, when was it founded? 7. Okay? 7, yeah. Now, what else happened in 2007? What else happened in 2007 is the founding of, or the training of the Ugandese army to become the first African to fight counterterrorism. Okay? Now remember, US policy from 2001 in Somalia was chasing terrorists, if you remember. And then at one point it changed to chasing pirates and so forth and so on, okay? Now, all of these, set them aside, but keep them in the back of your mind. Go back to 2007. 2007, AFRICOM was founded. 2007, the unit, the Ugandese unit, was trained to become the first group, Africans, to solve African problems. And there was a nice slogan, which was called Africans Solving African Problems, if you remember. I wrote an article under the same title. You can Google it up and you'll find it. At the time, in 2007. So, and my argument was, no, there's no African country that is organized itself to solve an African problem. Certainly not Museveni and Uganda, who's ruling the country for what, 40 years now, or if not more? 35, thank you. 45, subhanallah, He's like approaching the half a century, So now you think that person, that model is going to solve your problem. Think again. So we had individuals who were Somali representatives, ministers, who were taking tours in 2007, when I was writing, and that article was published in Al Jazeera, going to every community in North America, saying Africans solving African problems. Yes, indeed. We're all excited about it, right? Where is that African about after the billions that I just told you that was solving the problem? What did they solve? How many times our soldiers were sent to Uganda to this very day? That being trained and brought back and so forth and so on. So they are not intended to solve any problem for you in the same way that no one wants to solve the homeless issue that I gave you an example. The person who does not want to solve his own people's problems is not going to go way over there to solve another problem, okay? That's just not the way it happens. The human mind don't work there. So US had an interest, which I told you, which is the waters. So in order to do that, you don't just walk in one day and say, we control this water. You don't do that. You have to have a local, you have to cultivate a problem. You're solving a problem. You have to bring in other people who are guarding, and you're not going to say that these people are guarding your own interest, or their interest is money. Uganda gets paid hefty. In those days when I was writing the article, each soldier, an estimated expense was maybe $1,800 to $2,000. That was like $800 or $900, which was salary. And then when you're talking about logistics, healthcare, you're talking about other things that are related cost, hidden cost, and so forth and so on. Add all of them, $2,000. You know how much were the Somali soldiers were getting at the time? $100. How many soldiers did each one give you? 20. Who was the politician standing and saying, wait. We want those money. We want to hold you accountable. Those billions that were spent, we want to hire an independent audit company. You tell us where you spent. How many alat khoden? How many, wells have you dug for us? How many schools? How many hospitals? Every year we are going to, our politicians are going to Belgium, this $2 billion we're going to be donating to Somalia. Where did these money go? Where are they? No one is asking. So these groups that you mentioned were never intended to solve a problem for you. They would never intend. Yeah.
So why is our politicians in our country not saying that we don't want to? Why are we not?
Most of them are playing above the deck of the ship that I just gave you as a metaphor. Most of them are up there, huh? Everyone is wearing the jacket and having a good time and getting a few dollars. Most of them, not all.